They laughed when she walked into the restaurant kitchen. A simple woman in faded clothes, hair tied with an old scarf, holding a grocery bag instead of a fancy purse. The chefs joked that she looked more like someone who washed dishes than someone who could ever cook. One of them even mocked her, placing an apron in her hands and saying, "Here, why don't you cook something for us? Let's see what you think you know." They expected her to stumble. They expected her to fail. They expected a joke. But what they didn't expect was that the simple woman they were mocking was a 10-time international culinary champion, a woman whose recipes had won awards around the world. And when she stepped up to the stove, one man's life changed forever. Before we begin this emotional and inspiring story, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe to Tales and Turns for more powerful twists and real-life lessons. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. We love hearing from audiences across the world. Now, let's get into the story. She entered the restaurant quietly, holding a modest shopping bag with fresh vegetables she had bought from the street market. She had come only to pick up an order of food for a homeless shelter nearby. But when she reached the counter, a group of young chefs glanced at her and exchanged amused looks. Her clothes were simple, her shoes old, and she didn't carry herself with the loud confidence that some people expected from customers who knew fine dining. One of the chefs, a cocky young man named Samir, smirked and said loudly, "You look like you know your way around a kitchen. Why don't you come back here and make the dish yourself?" His friends laughed, unaware that life had just handed them the biggest lesson of their careers. The woman, whose name was Sophia, didn't respond with anger or irritation. She simply smiled softly, a smile that carried years of patience. "I only came to pick up food," she said gently. But her calmness made Samir push further. "Come on," he said, tossing her an apron. "If you think you can cook better, prove it." The other chefs clapped jokingly, treating her as entertainment rather than a person. The restaurant manager watched the scene unfold, shaking his head but too tired to intervene. Sophia stood still for a moment, holding the apron in her hands, thinking deeply. Then she looked at Samir, her eyes warm yet sharp. "Are you sure you want me to?" she asked. He rolled his eyes. "Just try not to burn the place down." Samir didn't know he was talking to the woman whose cookbooks had been translated into 6 languages, whose training videos were used in culinary schools, whose dishes had once brought Michelin inspectors to tears. For years, Sophia had traveled the world, competing, winning, teaching, creating masterpieces. But fame had never changed her humility. After her husband's passing, she had stepped away from competitions and lived quietly, cooking at shelters and community centers, never bragging, never seeking recognition. To the arrogant young chefs, she looked like nothing more than an ordinary woman, and that was their mistake. Sophia tied the apron gently, walked into the kitchen, and glanced around as if revisiting an old childhood home. Every tool, every spice jar, every stove burner. She observed them with familiarity, with respect. She picked up a knife and tested its weight. Too light. She sharpened it herself, and the sound of metal against stone silenced the kitchen. The chefs expected hesitation. Instead, what they witnessed was precision, confidence, mastery. She began chopping vegetables at a speed and accuracy none of them had ever seen before. Samir's smirk slowly faded as he watched her dice onions into perfect, identical cubes without even looking down. Then she started cooking. The moment oil hit the pan, her movements transformed from simple actions into a flow of artistry. She sautéed, seasoned, layered flavors, and balanced aromas in ways that stunned the room into complete silence. The air filled with a fragrance so rich, so complex, that customers in the restaurant began turning their heads toward the kitchen. One waiter leaned in and whispered, "Who's cooking? The smell is unbelievable." But the chefs remained speechless, watching as the simple woman worked with the grace of someone born to command a kitchen. Samir, unable to hide his curiosity anymore, stepped closer and muttered, Where did you learn this?" Sophia didn't look up. She simply stirred the pot and said, "Life teaches you many things when you're willing to learn." But as she plated the dish, a breathtaking fusion of traditional spices and modern presentation, the head chef walked in, drawn by the aroma. The moment he saw Sophia, he froze. His eyes widened. "You," he whispered, almost breathless. Samir looked at him, confused. The head chef swallowed hard. "Do you have any idea who this is?" When the young chefs shook their heads, he said the words that turned their world upside down. "This is Sophia Rahman, 10-time international culinary champion. She trained half the best chefs in this country." The kitchen erupted with shock. Samir stepped back, his pride collapsing like a broken wall. His hands trembled as reality hit him. The woman he mocked was a living legend. The head chef immediately approached Sophia with deep respect, bowing his head slightly. "Ma'am, it's an honor to have you here." Sophia smiled kindly, but her eyes held a quiet sadness. "Respect is beautiful," she said softly, "but it means nothing if it comes only after recognition." Her words hit Samir harder than any scolding could. He lowered his head, ashamed, whispering, I'm sorry." But the moment that truly changed everything happened next. Instead of scolding him or embarrassing him further, Sophia turned to Samir and said gently, "Would you like me to teach you something? No anger, no ego, just kindness." Samir felt tears sting his eyes as he nodded. The other chefs gathered around as Sophia began explaining techniques, flavors, balance, and the heart behind cooking. She corrected their mistakes with patience, guided them with warmth, and turned the kitchen, once filled with arrogance, into a classroom of humility. By the time the dish was served to the restaurant staff, people were lining up just to get a taste. Samir watched customers' faces light up with joy, realizing he had nearly thrown away an opportunity to learn from one of the greatest chefs in the world. When Sophia finally picked up her grocery bag to leave, Samir rushed to her side. "Mom," he said, voice trembling, "you changed my life today." She gently touched his shoulder and replied, "No, Samir, you changed your life the moment you chose humility over pride." Sophia walked out of the restaurant quietly, disappearing into the evening like a soft breeze, leaving behind a room full of young chefs whose hearts were transformed. Samir looked at the stove she used, still warm, still fragrant, and whispered a promise to himself to cook with dignity, to treat every person with respect, and to never judge someone based on appearances again. And from that day forward, he kept that promise because of one simple woman who turned a joke into a life-changing lesson.